Welcome to Craftlit, the podcast for crafters who love books. My name is Heather Ordover, and I'm podcasting from where the Delaware River meets the Old York Road, New Hope, Pennsylvania. Episode 510, Ben Gunn is Fly. This episode of Craftlit is brought to you by its listeners. Many thanks and much gratefulness to all of the listeners who have gone over to patreon.com/craftlit and pledged their support to the show. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you. Well, hello. How are you? I am well. I am also indoors because it is hotter than blazes outside. Here we were having lovely autumnal weather, and right now we have a heat advisory because it's just that hot. So here I am indoors recording, and I'm so happy that you've given me an excuse to do just that. What have we been doing on this end? We have been doing Shakespeare. Thing 2 has auditioned for his first Shakespeare play. So, Tara, I believe you can claim some credit in how well he did in his audition. He is a sophomore. Sophomores never get cast, and certainly never get cast with speaking roles. He is Conrad, one of Don John's evil henchmen. He's the gentleman of the two henchmen. I think that means he gets to be an integral part of the scene with the Night's Watch, where there's the whole joke about, and don't forget, I am an ass. And I can't tell you how excited he's going to be to get to do that scene. Good days. So we've been Shakespeareing around a while, and he is also preparing for INKTOBER. If you're not familiar with INKTOBER, I will put a link in the show notes. It's kind of along the same lines as NaNoWriMo, but for people who art. And I know the INKTOBER threads that I've followed the most in the past have been things like Aaron Ziegler's from Chop Bard podcast. This year, Thing 2 is going to do it. Thing 1 is also thinking about doing it. Thing 1, now Aaron. And I'm sure I'm going to get suckered into doing it on the weekends, but there's no way I'm going to have time to do it every day, all 31 days. So I don't think we've had time for much else. I certainly haven't had time for getting on social media nearly as much as I wanted to. In fact, Friday night, some tech support dude who, you have to call, and then they ask if they can take control of your computer, and you say, sure. And so you set that up. And this guy took control of the computer, and then without asking how large a file we were talking about, and without looking to see, he started a process that took 9.5 hours. So I didn't get home Friday night. What I did was at 11:30, checked into a hotel around the corner from work. And I was not the happiest camper ever. None of us were. It was pretty stinky. But came home on a train in the morning, got home, had a good day, slept well last night. So today I'm not feeling nearly as bitter and angry as I was yesterday. So yay, that's good. I'll take it for the win, whatever you can get. And today's chapters are so much easier than last week's. Last week, really, I don't know if you were able to finish it in one sitting, but it took a while to record, so I wouldn't blame you if you had to break that sucker into chunks. This week, you don't need me nearly as much before. There's just not that much tricky stuff that's going on. And I'm certainly not going to have to break in between chapters 19 and 20. But I think the title of our episode is one of the coolest things that I'm bringing up today. Ben Gunn is Fly. Ben Gunn is Fly is a statement made by Ben Gunn. Ben Gunn, who speaks about Ben Gunn in the third person, says that Ben Gunn is Fly. And I read it and I almost fell over laughing because that sounds so modern slangy. But I guess it sort of kind of could mean the same thing. But fly was a term that was used by less than reputable people at the time. And it generally meant sharp, quick, just like a fly. They move quickly. They move, they're agile, they're in and out. They appear to know what they're doing, which would be annoying me. So saying Ben gun is fly is a way to say man moves. You will hear the phrase noon watch, and then you'll hear 6 bells. So I went and looked this up, and Justin has posted an image, a screenshot from a Wikipedia page on how the bell systems work on ships. This is the old way that ship's bells work. They work in a slightly different way in a more modern age. But the idea is every shift, every watch was a 4-hour shift. So every bell represented the passage of 30 minutes. So they actually had a hourglass that they turned over. And every time they turned it over, they rang another bell. So every half hour gets a bell. So you're going to have how many bells? That's right, 8, said Heather, doing math in her head. Math that she can get correctly. So 6 bells doesn't mean 6 o'clock, which is a misconception that I found repeated in several different note sites and LitCrit analysis sites. So they didn't do their homework, is what I'm saying. However, the cool part about this is the watches reset during the time of day. So you have morning, you have afternoon, you have the dog's watch, which I think we mentioned before. The dinner time kind of watch in the evening was actually broken up. Instead of a 4-hour watch, it was 2-hour watches. So the first dog's watch and the second dog's watch. And then you have during the night. So the noon watch would have started at noon. Duh. So the first bell would have been 12:30. 2 bells would have been 1. 3 bells would have been 1:30. 4 bells would have been 2. 5 bells, 2:30. 6 bells, 3. Okay? So when you hear noon watch and 6 bells, sometime between noon and 3 p.m. is the range of time that we are shooting for when you hear that. Okay? It's kind of cool. And it makes sense. And actually, the way that you could judge, aside from the fact that you'd have the sun in the sky most of the time to let you know which of the watches you're on, the middle, the morning, the forenoon, the afternoon, the evening. The other thing that you'd have going for you is that the last bell was often rung differently than any of the other bells, just so you know. So that's the noon watch and 6 bells. You're going to hear a phrase called unsquared trunks. This is talking about building construction. Jim does a much better job than Dr. Livesey. Again, Jim, much better narrator. And I know I said it last week, but I don't think I said it today so far. We are back to Jim as our narrator. Dr. Livesey's done. We're back to Jim. Jim does a better job of talking about the stockade and giving us some really interesting details about how this place is constructed. One of the things he mentions is unsquared trunks. If you have never looked at unsquared lumber before, I have linked out to a YouTube video. And within like the first 15 seconds of the video, you will see an unsquared piece of wood. And all of a sudden your brain will go, oh, duh. If you keep watching the video, you'll see a hack that this guy came up with for how to square unsquared wood easily on a table saw, which is kind of a trick. So, if you wanted to watch the whole thing, it won't hurt. So that's unsquared trunks. It makes some descriptions of things that happen later in these 2 chapters make more sense as well, because of course it would be very hard to have a clean seam behind rough, ungraded, uncleaned wood. You will get a description today of Long John Silver described the way he looks in legend. That's right. We finally get and it's, of course, because this was written by the writer, it's everybody who came after who's made kind of a big deal about how he's dressed. Robert Louis Stevenson's just describing the way the guy's dressed. But for me, it was the bells went off going ding, 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 ding. Okay, now he's Long John Silver. Now he's who he's supposed to be. So we finally get a chance to get a glimpse of him looking, I put in air quotes, the way that at least I think of him as looking. So that's kind of cool. And we get to hear him be his cool pirate daddy self. He owns it when you see him in these chapters today. And I think that's a lot of fun. He will use a phrase that you have heard a variation of. And those of you who are truly nautical, you may have actually heard this as well. But in researching it, I learned an interesting thing. You know how we have that statement that people are always saying wrong, she said, looking at herself historically. The proof is in the pudding. And we've talked about this before ages ago on the podcast. The proof of the pudding is in the tasting, is the original statement. The proof is in the pudding kind of doesn't work so well when you really think about it. But the proof of the pudding is in the tasting makes sense. All right. You've heard the phrase, I imagine, 3 sheets to the wind, which sounds like, to landlubbers everywhere, I suppose, 3 sheets would be 3 sails to the wind, which I always assumed just meant 3 sails flapping. Looks kind of stupid, and if you're stupid drunk, then okay, there's the connection. It's close, but it's not correct. A sheet was not a sail. A sail is a sail. A sheet is the rope at the bottom of the sail, usually in the corners, where you tie the sail to the boom so that you keep the sail from flapping around. So 3 sheets in the wind. It used to be 3 sheets in the wind, not 3 sheets to the wind. I think when it changed to 3 sheets to the wind indicates when people stopped understanding what a sheet was. Originally, it was 3 sheets in the wind, 3 of these ties flapping around untied means the ship is unsailable, and if there is a wind, it's going to be maneuvering drunkenly. But there was also a scale, evidently. So 3 sheets in the wind, totally falling down drunk. 2 sheets in the wind, it's closing in on probably you shouldn't be driving anywhere, or maybe even be closing your eyes and trying to lie down because you'll probably just hurl all over yourself. A sheet in the wind's eye is the phrase you're going to hear today. And it just means you got your buzz on. You're not stupid drunk. You're also clearly not sober. A sheet, 1 sheet, in the wind's eye, flapping around, just making trouble. I love that. I also decided just on a whim that I needed to look up the word avast, because it is used here as a command, not as avast there ye me hearties or anything like that. It is avast, stop it. I thought, ooh, interesting. So they think, nobody really knows, the first time it was written down as a word that was used was in 1681, and it clearly means stop or cease what you are doing. And some people think it came from the Dutch, from houd vast or hold fast. Certainly could have. I don't know. If anybody knows more / better / more specific, let us know, 206-350-1642, and fill us in. A leeward side of something, or the lee shore, Lee. If you are on the leeward side of something, you are on the non-windy side. You are on the sheltered side. So the leeward side of a cliff is where you would want to be if you were stuck in a storm out in the nature. However, if you're on a boat or a ship or something that requires wind to move it, being on the lee side of anything would be a lousy place to be. And that is no joke. A rum puncheon is the cask or the barrel that holds the rum. The doldrums are actually a place, not just a place in Phantom Tollbooth. The doldrums are a region in the equatorial ocean where the trade winds are not blowing. So you've got trade winds blowing on the north side of the equator and the south side of the equator, and this is great because it means you can move across the equator pretty easily, depending on whether you know what you're doing or not. But there is a zone in there where there's just often, not all the time, but often nothing happening wind-wise, and those are the doldrums, not surprisingly. And on that note, let's listen to chapters 19 and 20 of Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson.
Chapter 19. Narrative resumed by Jim Hawkins. The garrison in the stockade. As soon as Ben Gunn saw the colours, he came to a halt, stopped me by the arm and sat down. "Now," says he, "there's your friends, sure enough." "Far more likely it's the mutineers," I answered. "That," he cried,
Why, in a place like this, where nobody puts in but gentlemen of fortune, silver would fly the Jolly Roger. You don't make no doubt of that. No, that's your friends. There's been blows too, and I reckon your friends has had the best of it. And here they are ashore in the old stockade as was made years and years ago by Flint. Ah, he was the man to have a headpiece, was Flint. Barring rum, his match was never seen. He were afraid of none, not he, only Silver. Silver was that genteel.
Well, said I, that may be so, and so be it. All the more reason that I should hurry on and join my friends.
Nay, mate, returned Ben, not you. You're a good boy, or I'm mistook. But you're only a boy, all told. Now, Ben Gunn is fly. Rum wouldn't bring me there where you're going. Not rum wouldn't, till I see you're born gentleman and gets it on his word of honour. And you won't forget my words. A precious sight, that's what you'll say. A precious sight more confidence, and then nips him.
And he pinched me the third time with the same air of cleverness.
And when Ben Gunn is wanted, you know where to find him, Jim. Just where you found him today. And him that comes is to have a white thing in his hand, and he's to come alone. Oh, and you'll say this, Ben Gunn, says you, has reasons of his own.
Well, said I believe I understand. You have something to propose, and you wish to see the squire or the doctor, and you're to be found where I found you. Is that all?
And when, says you, he added. Why, from about noon observation to about 6 bells.
Good, says I. And now may I go?
You won't forget, he inquired anxiously. Precious sight and reasons of his own, says you. Reasons of his own, that's the mainstay, as between man and man. Well then, still holding me, I reckon you can go, Jim. And Jim, if you was to see silver, you wouldn't go for to sell Ben Gunn. Wild horses wouldn't draw it from you. No, says you. And if them pirates came ashore, Jim, what would you say but there'd be widders in the morning?
Here he was interrupted by a loud report, and a cannonball came tearing through the trees and pitched in the sand, not 100 yards from where we two were talking. The next moment each of us had taken to our heels in a different direction. For a good hour to come, frequent reports shook the island, and balls kept crashing through the woods. I moved from hiding place to hiding place, always pursued, or so it seemed to me, by these terrifying missiles. But toward the end of the bombardment, though still I durst not venture in the direction of the stockade, where the balls fell oftenest, I had begun in a manner to pluck up my heart again, and after a long detour in the east, crept down among the shoreside trees. The sun had just set. The sea breeze was rustling and tumbling in the woods, and ruffling the grey surface of the anchorage, and tide too was far out, and great tracts of sand lay uncovered. The air, after the heat of the day, chilled me through my jacket. The Hispaniola still lay where she had anchored, but sure enough there was the Jolly Roger, the black flag of piracy, flying from her peak. Even as I looked, there came another red flash and another report that sent the echoes clattering, and one more round shot whistled through the air. It was the last of the cannonade. I lay for some time watching the bustle which succeeded the attack. Men were demolishing something with axes on the beach near the stockade. The poor jolly boat, I afterwards discovered. Anyway, near the mouth of the river a great fire was glowing among the trees, and between that point and the ship one of the gigs kept coming and going, the men, whom I had seen so gloomy, shouting at the oars like children. But there was a sound in their voices which suggested rum. At length I thought I might return towards the stockade. I was pretty far down on the low sandy spit that encloses the anchorage to the east and is joined at half water to Skeleton Island. and now, as I rose to my feet, I saw, some distance farther down the spit, and rising from among low bushes, an isolated rock, pretty high, and particularly white in colour. It occurred to me that this might be the white rock of which Ben Gunn had spoken, and that some day or other a boat might be wanted, and I should know where to look for one. Then I skirted among the woods till I had regained the rear, or shoreward side of the stockade, and was soon warmly welcomed by the faithful party. I had soon told my story and began to look about me. The log house was made of unsquared trunks of pine, roof, walls and floor. The latter stood in several places as much as a foot or a foot and a half above the surface of the sand. There was a porch at the door, and under this porch the little spring welled up into an artificial basin of a rather odd kind, no other than a great ship's kettle of iron, with the bottom knocked out and sunk to her bearings, as the captain said, among the sand. Little had been left beside the framework of the house, but in one corner there was a stone slab laid down by way of a hearth, and an old rusty iron bucket to contain the fire. The slopes of the knoll and all the inside of the stockade had been cleared of timber to build the house, and we could see by the stumps what a fine and lofty grove had been destroyed. Most of the soil had been washed away or buried in drift after the removal of the trees. Only where the streamlet ran down from the kettle a thick bed of moss and some ferns and little creeping bushes were still green among the sand. Very close around the stockade, too close for defence, they said, the wood still flourished high and dense. All of fir on the land side, but toward the sea with a large admixture of live oaks. The cold evening breeze, of which I have spoken, whistled through every chink of the rude building and sprinkled the floor with a continual rain of fine sand. There was sand in our eyes, sand in our teeth, sand in our suppers, sand dancing in the spring at the bottom of the kettle, for all the world like porridge beginning to boil. Our chimney was a square hole in the roof, but it was but a little part of the smoke that found its way out, and the rest eddied about the house and kept us coughing and piping the eye. Add to this that Gray, the new man, had his face tied up in a bandage for a cut he had got in breaking away from the mutineers, and that poor old Tom Redruth, still unburied, lay along the wall, stiff and stark, under the Union Jack. If we had been allowed to sit idle, we should all have fallen into the blues, but Captain Smollett was never the man for that. All hands were called up before him, and he divided us into watches. The doctor and Gray and I for one, the squire, Hunter and Joyce upon the other. Tired as we were, 2 men were sent out for firewood, 2 more were sent to dig a grave for Redruth. The doctor was named Cook. I was put sentry at the door, and the captain himself went from one to another, keeping up our spirits and lending a hand wherever it was wanted. From time to time the doctor came to the door for a little air and to rest his eyes, which were almost smoked out of his head, and whenever he did so he had a word for me. "That man Smollett," he said once, "is a better man than I am. And when I say that, it means a great deal, Jim." Another time he came and was silent for a while. Then he put his head on one side and looked at me. "Is this Ben Gunn a man?" he asked. "I do not know, sir," said I. "I am not very sure whether he's sane." "If there's any doubt about the matter, he is," returned the doctor. "A man who has been 3 years biting his nails on a desert island, Jim, can't expect to appear as sane as you or me. It doesn't lie in human nature. Was it cheese you said he had a fancy for?" "Yes, sir, cheese," I answered. "Well, Jim," says he, "just you see the good that comes of being dainty in your food. You've seen my snuff-box, haven't you? And you never saw me take snuff. The reason being that in my snuff-box I carry a piece of Parmesan cheese, a cheese made in Italy, very nutritious. Well, that's for Ben Gunn." Before supper was eaten, we buried old Tom in the sand and stood round him for a while bareheaded in the breeze. A good deal of firewood had been got in, but not enough for the captain's fancy, and he shook his head over it and told us we must get back to this tomorrow rather livelier. Then, when we had eaten our pork and each had a good stiff glass of brandy grog, the three chiefs got together in a corner to discuss our prospects. It appears that they were at their wits' end what to do, the stores being so low that we must have been starved into surrender long before help came. But our best hope, it was decided, was to kill off the buccaneers until they either hauled down their flag or ran away with the Hispaniola. From 19 they were already reduced to 15. 2 others were wounded, and one, at least, the man shot beside the gun, severely wounded, if he were not dead. Every time we had a crack at them, we were to take it, saving our own lives with the extremest care. And besides that, we had 2 able allies, rum and the climate. As for the first, though we were about half a mile away, we could hear them roaring and singing late into the night. And as for the second, the doctor staked his wig that camped where they were in the marsh, and unprovided with remedies, half of them would be on their backs before a week. "So," he added, "if we are not all shot down first, they'll be glad to be packing in the schooner. It's always a ship, and they can get to buccaneering again, I suppose." "First ship that I ever lost," said Captain Smollett. I was dead tired, as you may fancy, and when I got to sleep, which was not after a great deal of tossing, I slept like a log of wood. The rest had long been up, and had already breakfasted and increased the pile of firewood by about half as much again, when I was awakened by a bustle and the sound of voices. "Flag of truce!" I heard someone say, and then immediately after, with a cry of surprise, "Silver himself!" And at that I jumped up and, rubbing my eyes, ran to a loophole in the wall. End of Chapter 19. Chapter 20. Silver's Embassy. Sure enough, there were 2 men just outside the stockade, one of them waving a white cloth, the other no less a person than Silver himself standing placidly by. It was still quite early, and the coldest morning that I think I was ever abroad in, a chill that pierced into the marrow. The sky was bright and cloudless overhead, and the tops of the trees shone rosily in the sun. Where Silver stood with his lieutenant, all was still in shadow, and they waded knee-deep in a low white vapour that had crawled during the night out of the morass. The chill and the vapour, taken together, told a poor tale of the island. It was plainly a damp, feverish, unhealthy spot. "Keep indoors, men," said the captain. 10 to 1, this is a trick. Then he hailed the buccaneer. "Who goes? Stand or we fire." "Flag of truce!" cried Silver. The captain was in the porch, keeping himself carefully out of the way of a treacherous shot, should any be intended. He turned and spoke to us. "Doctor's watch on the lookout. Dr. Livesey, take the north side, if you please. Jim, the east. Gray, west. The watch below. All hands to load muskets. Lively, men, and careful." And then he turned to the mutineers. "And what do you want with your flag of truce?" he cried. This time it was the other man who replied. "Captain Silver, sir, to come on board and make terms," he shouted. "Captain Silver? Don't know him. Who's he?" cried the captain. And we could hear him adding to himself, "Captain, is it? My heart, and here's promotion." Long John answered for himself. "Me, sir. These poor lads have chosen me captain after your desertion, sir," laying a particular emphasis upon the word desertion. "We're willing to submit if we can come to terms and make no bones about it. All I ask is your word, Captain Smollett,
to let me safe and sound out of this here stockade, and 1 minute to go get out a shot before a gun is fired. My man, said Captain Smollett, I have not the slightest desire to talk to you. If you wish to talk to me, you can come, that's all. If there's any treachery, it'll be on your side, and the Lord help you. That's enough, Captain, shouted Long John cheerily. A word from you's enough. I know a gentleman, and you may lay to that. We could see the man who carried the flag of truce attempting to hold Silver back, nor was that wonderful, seeing how cavalier had been the captain's answer. But Silver laughed at him aloud and slapped him on the back, as if the idea of alarm had been absurd. Then he advanced to the stockade, threw over his crutch, got a leg up, and with great vigour and skill succeeded in surmounting the fence and dropping safely to the other side. I will confess that I was far too much taken up with what was going on to be of the slightest use as sentry. Indeed, I had already deserted my eastern loophole and crept up behind the captain, who had now seated himself on the threshold with his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands, and his eyes fixed on the water as it bubbled out of the old iron kettle in the sand. He was whistling to himself, "Come lasses and lads." Silver had terrible hard work at getting up the knoll, what with the steepness of the incline, and the thick tree stumps, and the soft sand, he and his crutch were as helpless as a ship in stays. But he stuck to it like a man, in silence, and at last arrived before the captain, whom he saluted in the handsomest style. He was tricked out in his best. An immense blue coat, thick with brass buttons, hung as low as to his knees, and a fine laced hat was set on the back of his head. "Here you are, my man," said the captain, raising his head. "You had better sit down." "You ain't a-going to let me inside, Captain?" complained Long John. "It's a main cold morning, to be sure, sir, to sit outside upon the sand." "Why, Silver," said the captain, "if you had pleased to be an honest man, you might have been sitting in your galley. It's your own doing. You're either my ship's cook, and then you were treated handsome, or Captain Silver, a common mutineer and pirate, and then you can go hang." "Well, well, Captain," returned the sea cook, sitting down as he was bidden on the sand, "you'll have to give me a hand up again, that's all. A sweet pretty place you have of it here. Ah, there's Jim. The top of the morning to you, Jim. Doctor, here's my service. Why, there you all are together like a happy family, in a manner of speaking." "If you have anything to say, my man, better say it," said the captain. "Right you are, Captain Smollett," replied Silver. "Duty's duty, to be sure. Well, now, you look here. That was a good lay of yours last night. I don't deny it was a good lay. Some of you pretty handy with a handspike end. And I'll not deny neither but what some of my people was shook. Maybe all was shook. Maybe I was shook myself, and maybe that's why I'm here for terms. But you mark me, Captain, it won't do twice, by thunder. We'll have to do sentry go and ease off a pint or so on the rum. Maybe you think we were all a sheet in the wind's eye, but I'll tell you I was sober. I was only dog-tired, and if I'd awoke a second sooner, I'd have caught you in the act, I would. He wasn't dead when I got round to him, not he." "Well," said Captain Smollett, as cool as can be. All that Silver said was a riddle to him, but you would never have guessed it from his tone. As for me, I began to have an inkling. Ben Gunn's last words came back to my mind. I began to suppose that he had paid the buccaneers a visit while they all lay drunk together round their fire, and I reckoned up with glee that we had only 14 enemies to deal with. "Well, here it is," said Silver. We want that treasure, and we'll have it. That's our point. You would just as soon save your lives, I reckon, and that's yours. You have a chart, haven't you?" "That's as may be," replied the captain. "Ah, well, you have it, I know that," returned Long John. "You needn't be so husky with a man. There ain't a particle of service in that, and you may lay to it. What I mean is, we want your chart. Now, I never meant you no harm myself." "That won't do with me, my man," interrupted the captain. "We know exactly what you meant to do, and we don't care, for now you see you can't do it." And the captain looked at him calmly and proceeded to fill a pipe. "If Abe Gray—" Silver broke out. "Avast there!" cried Mr. Smollett. "Gray told me nothing, and I asked him nothing. And what's more, I would see you and him and this whole island blown clear out of the water into blazes first. So there's my mind for you, my man, on that." This little whiff of temper seemed to cool Silver down. He had been growing nettled before, but now he pulled himself together. "Like enough," said he. "I would set no limits to what gentlemen might consider ship-shape or might not, as the case were, and seeing as how you are about to take a pipe, captain, I'll make so free as to do likewise." And he filled a pipe and lighted it, and the two men sat silently smoking for quite a while, now looking each other in the face, now stopping their tobacco, now leaning forward to spit. It was as good as the play to see them. "Now," resumed Silver, "here it is. You give us the chart to get the treasure by, and drop shooting poor seamen and stoving of their heads in while asleep. You do that, and we'll offer you a choice. Either you come aboard along of us, once the treasure's shipped, and then I'll give you my affidavy upon my word of honour to clap you somewhere safe ashore. Or if that ain't to your fancy, some of my hands being rough and having old scores on account of hazing, then you can stay here, you can. We'll divide stores with you, man for man, and I'll give my affidavy as before to speak the first ship I sight and send 'em here to pick you up. Now you'll own that's talking. Handsomer you couldn't look to get, not you. And I hope," raising his voice, "that all hands in this here blockhouse will overhaul my words, for what is spoke to one is spoke to all." Captain Smollett rose from his seat and knocked out the ashes of his pipe in the palm of his left hand. "Is that all?" he asked. "Every last word, by thunder," answered John. "Refuse that, and you've seen the last of me but musket balls." "Very good," said the captain. "Now you'll hear me. If you'll come up one by one, unarmed, I'll engage to clap you all in irons and to take you home to a fair trial in England. If you won't, my name is Alexander Smollett, I've flown my sovereign's colours, and I'll see you all to Davy Jones. You can't find the treasure, you can't sail the ship, there's not a man among you fit to sail the ship. You can't fight us. Gray there got away from 5 of you. Your ship's in irons, Master Silver. You're on a lee shore, and so you'll find. I stand here and tell you so. And they're the last good words you'll get from me, for, in the name of heaven, I'll put a bullet in your back when next I meet you. Tramp, my lad. Bundle out of this place, please, hand over hand, and double quick." Silver's face was a picture. His eyes started in his head with wrath. He shook the fire out of his pipe. "Give me a hand up," he cried. "Not I," returned the captain. "Who'll give me a hand up?" he roared. Not a man among us moved.
Growling the foulest imprecations, he crawled along the sand till he got hold of the porch and could hoist himself again upon his crutch. Then he spat into the spring. "There!" he cried. "That's what I think of ye. Before the hour's out, I'll stove in your old blockhouse like a rum puncheon. Laugh, by thunder, laugh! Before an hour's out, ye'll laugh upon the other side. Them that die'll be the lucky ones." And with a dreadful oath he stumbled off, ploughed down the sand, and was helped across the stockade after 4 or 5 failures by the man with the flag of truce, and disappeared in an instant afterward among the trees.
Okay, so we saw some interesting psychology in action. These are the first 2 chapters where I started to go, okay, no, this is quite definitely now the same guy who wrote Jekyll and Hyde. Because we saw a lot of interesting psychology going on in Jekyll and Hyde. And for this, I mean, there's been stuff where you're like, yeah, Robert Louis Stevenson gets teenage boy, and he gets adult people. And he even gives Trelawney the ability to not just be the butt of the joke, comic relief. I mean, he spends most of the first half of the book with Trelawney as a complete dork. And not just a complete dork, but the guy who gets them into this fix in the first place. But because people are never all one thing or the other, he also lets him be the crack shot. That's what makes Robert Louis Stevenson books so cool. They have complicated people. And boy, do we get to see some complicated people now. First off, though, Ben Gunn in the pinching. What is it with pirates and pinching? Was it Pew or Black Dog? One of the 2 guys was pinching at Jim all the way along. And I was like, why are they pinching him so much? And here's Ben Gunn he's pinching at Jim. I don't know why, but it's not supposed to be abusive. I don't think. Maybe it's just to get his attention or make it clear that this is serious. So I'm causing you some physical pain in order to make it clear that you need to pay attention. I don't know, but there's a lot of pinchiness going on. However, pinching aside, I thought it was awesome when Jim is not completely convinced that Ben Gunn is. It's hard to tell if Jim really thinks he's unsafe or if he's just odd and Jim is uncomfortable around him. But Livesey bringing up if you're questioning this, then it means there's enough of him in him still that he is fine. He is sane. You cannot expect some poor schmo who has been left alone on an island for 3 years not to lose it some. And he's going to come back. And the fact that he wants cheese is probably a good indication of his sanity. And do you not love that Dr. Livesey has a snuff box, but there's no snuff in it? Instead, he's got Parmesan cheese. I don't know if the import-export world had gotten Parmesan cheese up to Scotland by this time. My guess is yes, probably, but yes, probably really expensive. So I don't know if Robert Louis Stevenson came across Parmesan on one of his trips with his parents because they traveled a lot in trying to get him to warmer climes. Italy, of course, would have been one of them. To try and improve his health. His mother's health wasn't great either, so it would have been a smart thing to do. And of course, had he been in Italy, he would have come into contact with Parmesan cheese. But I also thought what Livesey says about that cheese is really interesting. It's a dry cheese. It is not going to go bad quickly. It is especially not going to go bad quickly if it's wrapped up and protected. So, smart move putting it in the snuff box. But a snuff box is not a huge thing, which means it is not a huge chunka burnin' Parmesan, babe, I want to say. It is just cheese. And Livesey, bless him, is going to give this up. I mean, clearly he's been saving it for a reason. And he's right. It's milk fat, it's protein, it's salt. It's a lot of things that you might need in your diet if you are, say, stranded somewhere and running out of food. All of that said, he's going to give it to Ben Gunn, which is just... Dude, what a mensch. I just dig Livesey. I feel about him the same way that I felt about Oh my gosh, the other guy whose name started with an L in Tale of Two Cities. And now I can't remember his name. It'll come to me at 3 a.m. Sorry about that. This is what happens when I have the stream of consciousness game of connections in my head as I am recording. So Parmesan in the snuff box, Smollett. We get to see a lot of interesting stuff about Smollett, but I think the most interesting thing that I noticed, you probably noticed other really cool things too, but the one that stuck out to me was while Silver is climbing over the fence and really, really having a hard time with his crutch and his bad leg and his working leg, making it up this sandy hill towards the house and the front porch and the spring and everything. Smollett's sitting there. He's waiting. He knows what Silver is doing, and he's looking at the ground and whistling. I can come up with like 6 different reasons why Smollett might be posturing like this. One of which, of course, would just be to look like he doesn't care. You know, here you are. You're the one waving the white flag, dude. I could not care less. I have made my decision. I've made my peace with my decision. You do you, boo-boo. That's fine. That's possible. It could be that he's made uncomfortable by scenes like this, that any kind of handicap is something that just makes him feel uncomfortable, and so he doesn't want to watch. That's certainly possible, too. The thing I'm going to go with, and you're more than welcome to disagree with me and tell me, 206-350-1642. The thing I'm going to go with is this. I'm thinking Smollett needs to stay tough. And we know that he liked Silver. And whatever it is that Silver's going to say to him, Smollett is probably of a mindset that, well, number one, Silver's not going to come with a white flag unless he needs something. Number 2, we know that Smollett knows that Silver is smart. Number 3, we know that Smollett was saddened that Silver turned out to be one of the pirates. But we also know that Smollett treated him with some extraordinary level of respect back that first day when they came into the cove. And he's like, look, let the guys go burn off some steam. They're frustrated. It's hot. It's disgusting. Let Silver take them ashore to go burn off some of this. And when they come back, they will have blown it off and no longer be mutinous and trying to kill Livesey, Trelawney, Jim, Smollett, and anybody else who's honest on deck. Putting all of that together, I started to wonder if Smollett wasn't positioning himself like this to not watch, and also whistling so as not to hear the struggle. If he was doing that specifically because he didn't want to weaken his own will. If Silver's going to come up and say something that sounds eminently reasonable, and I thought he did. I mean, as long as you could trust him, it was reasonable. And he's a pirate, so I suppose you can't. But if you could, or if you could be swayed to trust him, and I think that's where Smollett's attitude comes in, you've got to do something to harden Pharaoh's heart, to make it not possible to listen with an open mind. Smollett can't afford that. He has lives on the line that are not his. He's already lost one person. He has a child, a young adult behind him, and he's got a ship. I have a feeling he just wants the Hispaniola back. So there's also got to be part of him that's just like, well, we already know that he's ticked about the pirate saying, Captain Silver is here to speak to you. Captain? Whoa. Well, don't we think we're fancy? You know, Smollett's already bitter about that. But I really do think that he had to prevent himself from weakening in his resolve to not allow Silver to get in his mind. I don't know. That's just the way I saw it. But I still love that scene. And I also loved that Smollett was so clear that he would never have asked Abraham Gray to divulge secrets, even though they were pirate secrets and mutinous secrets. That is just a line that he is not going to cross. Those are not his secrets to know. He doesn't need to know them. All he needs to know is what he needs to do, and he can figure that out quite well on his own. Thank you very much. And I thought Silver's response to that was also interesting. It hadn't occurred to him. I mean, as complicated a character as Silver is, there are parts of him that are just 100% in his world, and Smollett's world and his world are not the same. And he certainly respects Smollett. And part of that respect is professional. He knows that Smollett is a good captain and a good leader. He's just not a pirate. So he can't be cool. He can just be good. I also loved that when Silver was ticked off and left, he did do something really reprehensible when he spat into the spring, the only clean water that they've got. Now, of course, he's probably also ticked off because they've got clean water, fresh water in the stockade, and the pirates don't. And as Livesey has already said, the pirates are hanging out around a swamp. I mean, between bugs and heat and humidity, anybody with a wound, anybody who is susceptible to mosquito bites, Heather, you're just not going to do very well there. And they don't have fresh water. I also thought that the very end of today's 2 chapters, aside from the fact that we learn that Ben Gunn has probably done something in killing a pirate specifically to help his case with Smollett and Livesey and Jim's people. He is the one, and Smollett played that super cool, not having a clue what Long John Silver was talking about. That Livesey did an incredible job of not giving it away, and I thought Gunn did a really smart thing for future chapters in clearly trying to throw his lot in with that of Jim and Smollett and Livesey and Trelawney. But that last scene, that last image of Silver, who is, again, totally dressed up in his big blue coat with his hat and the whole 9 yards. He is looking the part. For him to have to crawl back to the fence and then climb over it. And for the guy who's out there with the white flag, not even to help him until pretty much the last second, is just such a huge insult. And that, more than anything, I have a feeling, is going to burn his backside. That is just not okay. Because he's been treating Smollett with respect all the way along. And then, no, you don't get anything remotely like respect back. It's got to hurt. It's got to hurt. And I wouldn't want to have Long John Silver angry at me. Smollett is way tougher than I am. So, 2 good chapters. It wasn't like, the previous 3 where it was all drama. This was the psychological drama, and I like the psychological drama. So I'm going to go think about Long John Silver for a little bit longer. I hope you have a great week. I hope I have a great week too. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Have a great one. Bye. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review at iTunes or like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter or any one of a million different places that Craftlit wound up over the last 13 years. For more information on Craftlit, you can visit craftlit.com and subscribe via your favorite podcast app or download the Craftlit app so you can get all of your episodes right there in your hand, all in one place without having to hassle with anything else. So you can be sure not to miss any of Treasure Island. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on. Thanks.